Oh, that's messed up. Well, in the category of better late than never, I've finally been able to watch A Serbian Film. It came out about 10 years ago, but for the longest time, I simply couldn't find a copy. The streaming services wouldn't touch it with a 50-foot pole, and DVDs were available, but the uncut version was available only on the secondary market and for, frankly, outrageous prices that I wasn't going to pay. But as of January 19th, 2021, Unearthed Films has come out with this uncut Blu-ray edition, so I bought a copy and I was finally able to watch A Serbian Film. And now that I have watched it, I feel compelled to talk about it a little bit because this is a fairly notorious film. One might even call it an infamous film. I should say right from the start, this is going to be a spoiler-free discussion for two reasons. One, I generally don't have much room for spoilers anyway, although sometimes I might give a spoiler if I've warned appropriately in advance. I'm not even going to do that in this case because the second reason is that I'm pretty sure even talking about some of the things that happen in this film can get you in trouble with YouTube. And so just to avoid the issue entirely, I'm not actually going to talk in great detail about what's actually in this film. And for similar reasons, it's also difficult to say if this is even a good film or a bad film. It's certainly profoundly uncomfortable to watch, as you can see from the range of reactions that I had while I was watching it for the first time, but that's what it was trying to be. And so in that sense, it was a success. In fact, it has a reputation for being an outrageously extreme horror film, and though it's far from the first film to have that reputation, I have to say it actually comes closer to living up to its reputation for extremity than any other film that I've ever seen. Of course, as is the case with any film whose reputation precedes it, the actual film will never quite live up to what you've built up in your mind before you watch it, but the fact that this one even comes close is saying quite a lot. Part of the way a Serbian film manages to live up to its reputation is by blending explicit depictions of the horrible things that happen in this movie with the, let's say, artistic use of camera angles to obscure some of the worst of it and let the viewer's imagination fill in some of the details. That's a technique that's been used many times with great success because what you imagine is generally far worse than what you would actually see in the film itself. In one of my previous videos, I discussed some of the most disturbing books ever written, and one of the books that I discussed was Survivor by J.F. Gonzalez. In that book, again, I'm not going to mention exactly what happens, but there's one particular scene that everyone talks about as being the most horrific thing they've ever read. And in many ways it is the most horrific thing you've ever read. But if you actually go back and reread that passage, it just says that the thing happened, and all the details that everyone imagines having read all came from the reader's own imagination. The book actually glosses over the, let's say, gory details, but just by saying what happens in an artful way so that the reader, or in the case of the movie, the viewer, can fill in those details, the author or filmmaker manages to maximize the impact. But it's all well and good to just be extreme, and it's all well and good to force the viewer to confront horrific images, whether explicitly depicted in the film or the product of the viewer's own imagination. But the question is there actually artistic merit to the film? Is there something there, or is it just shocking imagery for the sake of shocking imagery? Well, the film is meant to be a sort of parody of what the director called the fascism of political correctness in Serbian cinema. I'm not sure that it was entirely successful in that particular stated goal, but it does contain some, I think, insightful commentaries on how we, and I mean all of us, not just the Serbian people, consume media. From the nightly news, to porn, to documentaries about serial killers, we're all obsessed with suffering and sex and violence, and we consume this media constantly, but we expect it to be somewhat toned down and sanitized before it ever gets to us. What a Serbian film does is it takes those same ideas and it rubs our noses right in it. In that way, it can offer some exploration or commentary on such issues as how we interact with the media we consume, or what even good people are sometimes willing to do, or forced to do, or tricked into doing when they're desperate for money and maybe sign up for things that they otherwise wouldn't. It also manages to offer some rather astute commentary on the moral degradation in our society, even as it wallows in the very cesspool that it seems to criticize. But all of that having been said, is this actually a good film? Well, it's hard to say. On every technical level, the answer is yes. The acting is exquisite, the special effects, horrifyingly, are very well done. The script moves at a good pace, it's never boring, it's always interesting. The cinematography does exactly what it needs to do. Everything on a technical level is put together as close to perfectly as it needs to be. But technical issues aside, it's a difficult film to watch. It can get into your head with graphic depictions of sex, including sexual violence, rape, murder, necrophilia, pedophilia, although I will say that that is among the more implied rather than explicitly depicted content, and even more of these depraved ideas. Basically, if you can think of something shocking and horrible, there's a good chance that it's in this film. And as many viewers have said, it's in this film in a way that can sort of get under your skin, and it's not just that you watch this film and you're disturbed while you watch it, but that it gets into your head and that these images can stick with you and haunt you for a long time into the future. Now, y'all know me. I am not a lightweight when it comes to this stuff. I'm about as heavyweight as it gets when it comes to horror, because I'm constantly on a quest for books, games, movies that can scare me, but also that can disturb me, that can shock me, that can disgust me, because I've seen so much. It's so rare that any work manages to actually get to me in any sort of meaningful way. And I'm not going to go out on a limb here and say that this film has scarred me for life, because it hasn't. It's not that bad. Despite what some people have said, it's not going to give me horrible nightmares. It's not going to haunt my dreams forever. You know, it was horrible, and yeah, it's going to be hard to forget some of those images, but I'm no worse for the wear. That having been said, even being the sort of horror heavyweight that I am, this film was able to get to me in a way that most simply don't. I'm not saying it went too far, or that it scarred me, or that it seriously disturbed me, but it provoked a reaction that even the so-called most extreme horror films tend not to for me. And for me, that's sort of what it all comes down to. This movie sets out to shock, disgust, and disturb, and in that it succeeds, to varying degrees for varying people. I would not recommend this to non-horror people for sure. I don't even recommend this to most horror audiences, because this is not the kind of thing that most people want to watch. But if you like extreme films, if you like, for instance, all those cannibal movies that people like to talk about, or even Martyrs for a more recent example, if those are your kind of movie, this might be your cup of tea as well. If those aren't for you, this one is certainly not for you. And so that's my bottom line. If you are looking for a movie that will shock, disturb, and disgust, go ahead and watch A Serbian Film, and you probably won't regret it. If you are not looking for a movie that will shock, disturb, and disgust, all three, then this is not going to be for you. Putting that aside, though, there's one more very good reason to want to buy or watch A Serbian Film, and that is that it is one of the most heavily censored films in all history. Astonishingly, even in the United States, where we pride ourselves on being sort of the bastion of free expression, a full minute of the film had to be cut even to get the NC-17 rating, which itself is like the kiss of death for marketability and distribution. Now, as you might guess, I have some rather passionate thoughts about the MPAA and the ratings board and the whole ratings system and censorship in general, and at some point those will be the topic of a video of their own. This is not the forum to get into great depth on the subject. But what I will say is, this film has been banned, according to IMDb, in at least 46 different countries, and many countries have required edits to the film in order to get certification. And for me, censorship alone is a good enough reason to watch something. And that's how I feel about A Serbian Film. Even though this is certainly not everyone's cup of tea, if you have the stomach for it, I feel like more people ought to watch it simply because there are so many people who are telling us that we shouldn't or can't watch it. My general philosophy is, whenever somebody tells you that you shouldn't or can't do a thing, that alone is good enough reason to at least consider the possibility that you might want to do that thing, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else, of course. And in fact, that's probably the main reason that I so wanted to watch A Serbian Film. It wasn't just that I was curious to see this most extreme horror movie ever made, although I was, but when people censor a film, I feel like maybe the artist behind the film is trying to say something, and maybe the censor shouldn't be allowed to stop that message from getting out. So that's what I have to say about A Serbian Film. I do, on some level, recommend it if you have the stomach for it, but I certainly don't recommend it to most people. And now, I've got to go bleach out my eyeballs. So until next time, take care and stay scared.